Last week, we began the story of Professor Hopeton Dunn from Saltmarsh, Trelawney to the newsroom of the then Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation. This week, from Jamaica to the Caribbean and beyond. I'm Archibald Gordon. This is Profile. Welcome to Profile Part 2 now of my conversation with Professor Hopeton Dunn. Last week we began the story and he took us from Saltmarsh, Trelawney to the Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation newsroom, to Cornwall College and the Jamaica Live service in between. And tonight we're going to be continuing that journey because as we ended last week, we talked about the fact that you had an opportunity to return to the JBC newsroom but decided not to, but to take compensation instead. And go where?
So I wanted to explore other opportunities. I went to work with a place called Social Action Center, SAC, where I was working with sugar workers publishing a newspaper called Workers' Time. I was also interested in media, still on the electronic side, so and broadly. So I was beginning to do some part-time teaching then at Mascom, as it was then called, now Carimac. So I had interesting enough things to do. I was by then already getting married and a family was on the way and so on and so forth. So I was looking for a wider, broader future. But one thing that fascinated me was the forces at play during the JBC issue. So there were the legal forces that prevailed in our favor. There were the political forces. There was, of course, the media, broadly speaking. And all of those were wheels turning in wheels that made for a fascinating kind of interplay. That provided me with a kind of think piece about what could this mean for my future. So I began to think about further studies. I took on study of public policy that led me, after my undergraduate degree at UWI, to study policy at University of London, public policy, especially in relation to communication, and to next go on to do a doctorate in the subject. But it all started with that interest in the interworking of these various forces.
Driven by what actually happened in your life.
At a very personal level.
So you're theorizing now, you're in school and you're theorizing all of the concepts that you are reading, they are real to you because you've lived all of them.
Exactly. And I'm saying, how can I share something with a wider audience, a group of students, about lessons learned, about possibilities and so on. But I also took the decision to add an element to it, which was the technology. The technology, of course, you're working in radio and television. You're working around technology all the time. But that technology kept changing. And so I also wanted to know, how did the emergence of these various forms of technology may have an impact on public life, on people's lives, on what was happening in media.
And this is a rapid changing, by the way. I've often said to people that I came to RJR, and within 1 year, to Radio Jamaica's newsroom, and within 1 year we went from having cassettes to DAT machines, to CDs, to digital, to a different kind of tape, to something called a meringues, and then to digital. That happened in the space of like 2 years.
That's right. And at home, people are experiencing it in a similar way, but through home systems and cassette systems and so on. So I was interested in that, very interested in that. And what also grabbed my interest was the constraints that we were experiencing in enjoying the benefits of these emerging technologies. And to me, one of the biggest constraints was the monopoly which Cable and Wireless then held on telecommunications in Jamaica, the Caribbean, and many other parts of the world. It ended up being the subject matter of my PhD thesis, because I wanted to better understand cable and wireless, and I was studying in England, mind you. So I was able to study cable and wireless, an English company in England itself, and to see it as a kind of colonial reaching out for purposes of managing outposts, so to speak. Cable and wireless had a unique history in the United Kingdom, where it did not operate so much in the last half a century in the United Kingdom itself.
Yes.
That was British Telecom. But it was the British overseas telecoms conglomerate which extracted profits and controlled the technologies in many of these societies. So I took it on myself to actually make that be the subject of my PhD, about how we can think about deconstructing this monopoly and what it would open up for our society in many ways.
What we now know as a sort of the beginning of what we call liberalization of the telecommunications sector, which would have led to companies like Claro, to Digicel, and to the kind of structure that we actually have right now.
Yes. So I was one of those very much in the lead by the time I came back to Jamaica with, by the way, a PhD in telecoms policy, in public policy, based on cable and wireless, in the lead in a public campaign about getting the monopoly ended.
Of the monopoly?
Yes. And many people were part of it, but I was very much front and center. I was active, lobbying governments and so on and so forth. Thankfully, the government of the day listened, and they, let's just say, put in place a new minister whose mandate it was to carry out exactly what we were lobbying for.
And this also sort of coincided with the Broadcasting Commission at the same time?
Yes, but somewhat later, because there was this long period in which we were battling for communication to be freed up in Jamaica. And I then became chairman of something called the Telecommunications Advisory Council. Since they were saying I was calling for all of these things, now go and do it. They gave me the role of chairman of the Telecommunications Advisory Council, which is the body that handled the competition that we were inviting to be the competition with the old cable and wireless in relation to how we were going forward.
And your interest in policy now takes form in and of itself.
In a real way, because I was now to be a policy actor myself in that particular environment.
All right, that is beautiful. We have to take our second break our first break on this episode of Profile, part 2 of my conversation with Professor Hopeton Dunn. More when we return.